The waters of Lake Titicaca reveal a host of unfamiliar sights to the men of Calypso. Beneath its cold waters, they search for the legendary source of the Inca Empire, once the most extensive in all the Americas. There are few places on Earth where man has not probed, but this remote sanctuary has been untouched. And so the aura of mystery clings to it. Great fables have grown of untapped riches in its depths. Muffled for centuries, each stone becomes a chronicle, hinting at civilizations that predate even the Inca. Even the frog-like creatures that inhabit its waters are strangely unique. Myth and mystery are part of its heritage. Such are the legends of Lake Titicaca. August 14th. Beneath the rolling waters, a team of divers explores the ocean floor. Anchored in the swell, the ship awaits their return. Captain Jacques Cousteau keeps a weather eye out as winds and the sea rise. Underwater, the restless storm makes little impression. Tides and currents replace wind and gales, but they move in steady cycles, and the creatures of the reef adapt to their rhythms.
I know how peaceful it is down there. It feels like a three-dimensional rapture. I know what the temptation is to forget the surface and to swim from one surprise to another as erratically as jaywalkers. Busy and amused as they are below, they will not bother about our growing worries above. As it often happens in hurricane season, the weather has turned very quickly. I call the divers back before recovery becomes impossible. They emerge from the quiet deep to the rolling deck, from an element through which they can fly back to the world where they are again at the mercy of gravity. Jean-Paul, we are through with this operation. We should sail as soon as possible to Peru, because in 6 weeks it will be the rainy season on Lake Titicaca. When we are in Matarani, here, we will load the 2 mini-subs and 20 tons of equipment on a railway to cross the Andes Mountains to the lake. Why Lake Titicaca? Well, of course, the name is fascinating in itself, but that wouldn't be enough. For us divers, diving at almost 12,500 feet of altitude is quite a challenge. And we know nothing about the physiology of high-altitude diving. We know very little about the lake itself, as a matter of fact. The depth, the life there is, the geological origins. And we are also in Inca land. It means that all around the lake there are giant constructions and temples that may very well extend underwater. So we are going there to study human physiology, biology, geology, archaeology. And there also are legends. It is said that the Incas, when the Spanish arrived, have thrown into the lake very valuable gold pieces of art. Who knows?
At the Pacific port of Matarani, Peru, a special train awaits to carry 17 men, 20 tons of equipment, and the 2 mini-subs, more than 12,000 feet up into the Andes. Only a skeleton crew remains on board. The others depart the familiar confines of the ship with mixed feelings of anticipation and apprehension. Zoom is left behind for fear of his reaction to a potentially hostile environment. An altimeter will track the ascent in meters of altitude. The train climbs steeply to emerge at the 1,000-foot level on a plateau, where the first chill air muffles the landscape in fog. More than 4 centuries ago, the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro crossed these mountains in a cruel and tireless search for gold. Ultimately and tragically, he succeeded. His ruthless looting was a bonanza for the crown of Spain, at the cost of a bigger loss for mankind. At Pampa de Arrieros, the caravan pauses to let the descending train pass.
We look at the Indians, and they look back at us. Between us, there is curiosity, but little possibility of understanding. We feel separated by differences as great as the height of the Andes and the depth of the sea.
The Incas built a vast network of roads through the mountains. But modern Peru has matched their achievement in stringing railways across some of the most vertical real estate in the world. The divers have done little more than sit and watch the scenery go by. But they notice that even normal activities like walking and stooping bring lightheadedness. Crucero Alto, little more than a switching depot on the line, marks the highest point in the journey, 14,666 feet above sea level. From here, the expedition will drop 2,000 feet to the lake itself.
After so many mountains, the lake looms large as a sea. 140 miles long by 40 miles wide, it is the highest navigable body of water in the world.
At Tiwanaku, a few miles from the shores of Titicaca, lies one of the few restored ancient ruins. Archaeologists can discern traces of at least 5 civilizations in these stones, 4 of which predate the Incas. Much of the art and achievement popularly attributed to the Incas was actually contributed by the various peoples they replaced. Like the Romans, their skill lay in conquest and organization. But none of these civilizations ever developed a form of writing, and only scattered remnants of carved rock remained to hint at their glories. Lake Titicaca forms part of the boundary between Peru and Bolivia. From the Peruvian port of Puno, the expedition crosses to the town of Copacabana in Bolivia, which will be its base of operations. The diving saucers excite the curiosity of the normally reserved mountain people, who immediately declare a holiday and insist on a fiesta. In a combination pagan rite and Christian ceremony, the saucers are blessed and prepared for baptism. The costumes, made for a dozen different celebrations and dredged out for the affair, represent the Indians' interpretation of church holidays imposed by Spanish missionaries. Few remember their original meanings, and few care. Religion in these isolated communities means more than the periodic observance of biblical events. It provides welcome breaks in a routine existence. Eager to get on with their work, the crew finds it impossible to shortcut the festivities. All rituals, down to the symbolic dipping of the saucers, must be completed first.
Aboard the barge that will serve as our diving platform, we have a new sense of apprehension. Loading our equipment took immense physical effort. At this altitude, even minor jobs leave us exhausted. The lake seems endless. The surface is foreboding, and our worries about high-altitude diving are magnified by the plight of the cormorants. In the thin air of Lake Titicaca, normally graceful cormorants struggle to lift off the water.
Off the tip of the Copacabana Peninsula lie the once sacred islands, the most likely spots to begin explorations. Though the air temperature is a brisk 50 degrees, Cousteau finds the effects of the sun doubly intense in the thin air.
Là, il est dur aujourd'hui, hein? Ça cogne, hein?
Lake Titicaca sits in a pocket carved out by glaciers. Its water level rose and fell with each ice age. Fed by the snows of the Andes, the lake has no outlet, and today its level is slowly rising again. It is possible that some of the ruins of the sacred islands have been submerged. Cousteau cruises the shore, seeking probable points of extension. Aboard the barge, the crew prepares to conduct a test dive to determine how the altitude will affect their ability to perform tasks underwater. But the compressor experiences altitude problems of its own. The air does not provide sufficient oxygen for the motor to catch. The solution is to feed pure oxygen into the carburetor.
Delamotte and Deloire will be first to dive. They have dressed slowly because even the normal routine of putting on equipment is difficult. Before a man can move about with ease, his red corpuscle count, lung size, and metabolism must be altered. But it takes 3 generations for the human body to adapt in this way. We will film the exploratory dive to check the reactions of the divers as well as the visibility below the surface. Our greatest worry now is that exhaustion may overtake the divers. On the surface, atmospheric pressure was little more than half that at sea level. A lungful of air provided only half the oxygen. As they reach the depth of 15 feet, the air they breathe from the regulator is back at ocean level pressure and they receive a normal amount of oxygen. As they sink slowly, their fears dissolve.
An underwater meadow of lush greenery stretches out on every side. Because the sun is almost unfiltered by a very thin atmosphere, its radiation penetrates deeper in Lake Titicaca than in lower lakes. Under the vegetable carpet, the bottom is made of mud and silt, several yards thick. The lake is reputed to be rich in fish, but the divers find scant evidence of the schools they expected to see.
As soon as they return to surface, the men are plagued again by exhaustion. We are pioneering a new field, high-altitude diving. It has its new rules that our physiologists have developed theoretically in Marseille and that we must verify in the field. To avoid decompression accidents, called the bends, decompression stops must be made on the way back to the surface. In the sea, these stops are made at the depth of 20 feet and then again at the depth of 10 feet. Here in the Strato Lake, the stops were set higher at 12 and 6 feet. Our new decompression tables for Titicaca have proven safe.
Dr. Jacques Tassi submits the divers to a thorough re-examination. Physically, they do not seem to have suffered. Working underwater proves less exhausting than working on land at this altitude. But he fears the men may be unable to maintain a balance and rules that their workload be reduced by 40%. The island of the sun and the island of the moon apparently once played key roles in both the religious and secular life of the Incas. Half-buried foundations literally cover the Sun Island, and on the moon stands the quarters of the Vestal Virgins, the Incas' harem. Archaeologists feel both islands were probably larger at one time. Dumas, an authority on archaeology, marvels at the engineering skill which set huge blocks of interlocking stone with such precision that a razor blade cannot slip between them. After calculating where underwater extensions are likely to be found, the divers follow a course that takes them through the waving Tortora reeds. The rubber Zodiac can swim over the reeds, but the outboard small propeller becomes badly snarled. Jean Riant pushes through a sea of algae, seeking an opening. Growing in jungle-like profusion, the reeds threaten to entangle him as well. But the heavy growth also provides what is to be their most efficient means of transportation. Mechanization has its place on the lake, but Indian ingenuity provided the best method of navigating the reeds centuries ago. The canoes, made of the same reeds lashed together, draw bare inches of water. Dumas comes upon a huge monolith at the water's edge. Its surface worn, it seems nevertheless to have once been cut and shaped. Behind it, other cut stones lead Dumas to the discovery of a carved snake, its eyes protuberant, its coils disappearing into the flat rock. Dumas follows the trail across the narrow point of land to where it meets the water again. The walls are probably extensions of the ruins found on shore. The gradual rise of the water covered them. Long ago, they were evacuated and stripped of their valuable artifacts. They stretch out toward the deep reaches of the lake and back to the dim reaches of history. Said to have once been sheathed in gold, they gave rise to legends of submerged treasure. Now, ironically, the same stones shatter forever the legends they inspired. But for the first time, a total picture of the Incan ruins can be drawn.
Perhaps these walls enclosed the temple of the sun god himself. Perhaps these stones echoed to the laughter of the Incas' favorite concubines before the invasion of the conquistadors put a stop to all joy. And perhaps beneath the rocks and the mud lie other secrets still waiting to be disclosed.
For the people of the lake, everything they don't understand is Inca. They can provide little useful information, but they direct the divers to the old man of the lake. Born on the island of the sun, he has lived on these shores for all of his 86 years. Between bites of mildly narcotic cocoa leaves, he tells of a tunnel that stretches from the lake to Cusco, ancient capital of the Incas.
Oh yes, an underground and underwater tunnel, 300 miles long, made by the Incas. We've heard such things. Also, we heard that there was a 7 or 8 mile long gold chain at the bottom of the lake. Such legends we've heard and investigated, but they're never there.
The water is generally clear, offering visibility of at least 60 feet. but the bottom is often a mess of thick reeds and piled stones. Covered with algae and almost indistinguishable from the surrounding rocks, what appears to be pieces of pottery catch Jean Riant's eye.
Pottery shards are to archaeologists what nuggets are to prospectors. I have found earthenware jugs on many expeditions in the past. We know at first only that the pottery is primitive in design. Experts will affix the date and place of origin and thus bring meaning to the discovery. Simple artifacts often give a better picture of ancient times than ornaments left in the tombs of kings.
As explorations continue, the absence of fish becomes more noticeable. It is known that fish form a mainstay in the diet of the people who live on the lake. Diver Riant decides to investigate one of the floating villages of the Uru Indians. The Urus once flourished at Titicaca, but now number less than 200 people. And although they literally live on the water, they fear it, believing anyone who falls in will die instantly. The islands that support the Uru villages float on the surface of the lake. They are built of layers of Totora reed. As the bottom layers rot, fresh reeds are spread on top. Though they tend fires carefully, stray sparks occasionally ignite the dry reeds, and the population takes to the canoes, waits until the fire burns itself out in the lake, and builds another village.
To a superstition-ridden people, Riant represents the incomprehensible world of modern society. Until recently, the Urus would not even allow photographs to be taken of their faces, sharing a belief common among primitive people that by capturing images, the camera was capturing souls. Riant serves as an effective distraction, allowing us to film the Uru village with relative freedom.
Cormorants abound in the village. Though they are used in other lands for fishing, the Urus raise them like chickens for food. Were modern education more effective, Riant might have missed his most significant find. On his walk, he has seen items of pottery identical to the samples taken from the lake. Riant leaves the way he came. Perhaps a generation from now, mothers will persuade children to eat their suppers before the black and yellow devil emerges once more from the depths.
One by one, ancient cultures have taken root here and passed on. They have left behind mysteries to be solved and a pervasive sadness at their loss.
For 4 weeks, the divers have scouted the lake bottom as far as they could. Final scrutiny of the deep pools will be left to the mini-subs. As these are prepared, the divers begin investigations on the animal life of the lake.
Even the animals here are touched with mystery. Though it acts like a frog, it looks like a toad. We have met them everywhere underwater, but never on the surface.
Bearing the unwieldy scientific name Telmatobius coolius, or bag that lives in the marsh, these toads are unique to Lake Titicaca. Most toads are amphibious. They must surface to breathe and live as much of their lives out of the water as in. In Telmatobius coolius, the lungs have atrophied past the point of use, yet none possess gills like fish. They breathe instead through bag-like folds of skin. Minute capillaries in the skin take oxygen directly from the water.
The question remains, what drove our friends to this underwater existence? It is probable that the thin air of the Andes did not supply enough oxygen for their small lungs. So they became aquatic.
The toads spend most of their time in the protective growth on the bottom of the lake. Eternally submerged and voiceless, they cannot croak. Without a mating call, they perform a mating dance, 2 by 2, in delicate pantomime.
There is still another puzzle in the lake. We come across scores of dead or dying fish scattered among the weeds. Some appear bloated, some misshapen. None seems to have been killed for food. We know that toads feed mostly on water insects and tiny mollusks. Nothing approaching the size of fully grown fish. The water birds, which flock on the shores of the lake, swallow their dinners whole. None of these could account for the mass slaughter such quantities of dead fish indicate. To solve the riddle, we collect specimens. They will be sent to the Oceanographic Institute in Monaco for autopsy and analysis.
Whatever is killing the fish, the ecology of the entire lake, including the life of the Uru Indians, will be seriously affected unless it is stopped. The incredible number of toads encountered prompts further study, a representative census of their population in Lake Titicaca. Since there is no part of the lake where divers did not find toads, Cousteau directs the crew to mark off an area of roughly 1 acre. The men will collect every toad inside the lines, count the catch, and multiply to arrive at a rough estimate of the total number. For the toads seem to constitute a settled community, with no natural enemies, and no place else to go. Left too long out of water, the toads, like fish, will die. But collection proceeds rapidly. The animal's dimensions are surprising. Stretched out, they average 2 feet in length, with feet and legs almost twice as long as the body. They weigh up to 6 pounds. Selected specimens will be forwarded to the Institute in Monaco for further study. There is no indication that the toads have ever been used as a food source at Lake Titicaca. But with the fish population dying out, they may provide a fresh source of protein. Telmatobius coolius does not possess a uniform pattern of color or design. Each toad is an individual, bearing its own unique set of markings. The census complete, Falco releases the toads. The final count, 200. The estimate of Lake Titicaca's total toad population, 1 billion. Eager to join his longtime friend in another underwater expedition, Dr. Harold Edgerton arrives from MIT and quickly readies his special sonar equipment. A highly sophisticated device, its acoustic signal indicates not only depth, but the nature of the bottom, mud, sand, or rock. It was invented by Edgerton, who was also creator of the strobe light. The magic of electronics etches a precise profile of the lake bottom.
Baby Air, I wish to show you many of these records made in Lake Titicaca around the island of the sun and the island of the moon. One of the most interesting areas has been plotted up on another chart, which shows Sun Island, the main island of Copacabana. This map shows many records, sonar records, that have been consolidated into one map showing a ridge that comes up to about 50 feet deep, another ridge which comes up to the surface at this point and then disappears at about 330 feet deep. And in between these, there's a sediment pond that's about 400 feet deep. Now this would make a very, very interesting place for you to dive with the Sucoup, because you would have almost a complete flat bottom coming up to sharp rocks which rise almost directly, vertically from the sediment layers.
Finally, the moment for the Sucoups, the mini-subs, arrives.
You know, I feel like at sea. I really can hardly realize that we are on a lake. Here in Lake Titicaca, in freshwater, the mini-subs will probably be 150 pounds heavy. We have to add some floats, additional floats that we don't need in the sea, that we are going to bolt on top of the saucers to compensate for this negative buoyancy. And we hope our pilots will be able to maneuver just as easily in Lake Titicaca as they do in the ocean.
The barge in position. The crew makes a final check. Cousteau and Falco will man the subs.
Alors, est-ce que tu crois que c'est bon pour toi?
From inside, Cousteau reports all systems perfect. Phone connection with the deck is unplugged, and the last lifeline released. A diver accompanies the mini-subs as far as 100 feet to make sure they have not been damaged in the long trek from Matarani. Using the lights of the subs, Cousteau and Falco signal farewell.
We have estimated the buoyancy compensation exactly, and the floats do not hamper maneuverability. Surrounded by the familiar machinery of the mini-subs, we feel less alien in this strange environment.
Steered by jets of water released through movable nozzles, the subs can be maneuvered with pinpoint accuracy. Cameras are mounted to film what the eye sees. The subs not only open new areas for underwater exploration, but also bring back a permanent record. The subs gingerly skirt the rocky ledge as they start down. With Edgerton's sonar chart to guide them, the descent goes quickly and smoothly. At a depth of 400 feet, the subs reach bottom and move off to examine the floor of the lake.
Falco and I exchange remarks over the sonar telephone, and we cannot help constantly referring to our experiences in the sea. The water of the lake is almost as clear as deep ocean water. Freshwater plankton is thinner than that of the sea. The sediment at the bottom of the lake, as measured by Edgerton, is at least 35 feet thick. What Falco and I feel but do not express is the thrill of seeing what no man has seen before.
Halfway across the pool, their attention is sharply riveted by the sight of seemingly random tracings in the flat mud. Both subs veer to follow the zigzagging lines.
The tracks had been made by our old friends. I was shocked. There has never before been a record of toads living at depth of more than 400 feet.
At the far side of the pool, the spine-like ridge charted by the sonar rears up before the subs, marking a symbolic end to their exploration. Cousteau signals Falco to start up. They carry away a wealth of new knowledge and the certain end of Lake Titicaca's fanciful legends of Inca gold. Like mechanical whales, the mini-subs signal their location to the barge.
In the last instant of our journey, the appearance of the submarines at the surface spans 1,000 years in the history of Lake Titicaca.
For the answer to the problem of dying fish, Cousteau journeys to Monaco. The fish sent back from the lake have been examined at the Oceanographic Institute. The cause of death, an infection specific to trout. Trout were introduced into the lake in 1940 to provide a more substantial food fish. The results have been tragic. Now biologists are already at work, seeking countermeasures before both trout and native fish succumb, leaving the toads in sole possession of the legendary source of the Incas. The Calypso pushes off, her decks bearing souvenirs headed for an oceanographic museum in the United States. Her sailors home again, and the dust of ancient empires scattering before a fresh wind from the sea.
They emerge from the quiet deep to the rolling deck, from an element through which they can fly back to the world where they are again at the mercy of gravity.
Jean-Paul, we are through with this operation. We should sail as soon as possible to Peru, because in 6 weeks it will be the rainy season on Lake Titicaca. When we are in Matarani, here, we will load the 2 mini-subs and 20 tons.
The waters of Lake Titicaca reveal a host of unfamiliar sights to the men of Calypso. Beneath its cold waters, they search for the legendary source of the Inca Empire, once the most extensive in all the Americas. There are few places on Earth where man has not probed, but this remote sanctuary has been untouched. And so the aura of mystery clings to it. Great fables have grown of untapped riches in its depths. Muffled for centuries, each stone becomes a chronicle, hinting at civilizations that predate even the Inca. Even the frog-like creatures that inhabit its waters are strangely unique. Myth and mystery are part of its heritage. Such are the legends of Lake Titicaca. It's their return. Captain Jacques Cousteau keeps a weather eye out as winds and the sea rise. Underwater, the restless storm makes little impression. Tides and currents replace wind and gales, but they move in steady cycles, and the creatures of the reef adapt to their rhythms.
I know how peaceful it is down there. It feels like a three-dimensional rapture. I know what the temptation is to forget the surface and to swim from one surprise to another as erratically as jaywalkers. Busy and amused as they are below, they will not bother about our growing worries above. As it often happens in hurricane season, the weather has turned very quickly. I call the divers back before recovery becomes impossible.
August 14th. Beneath the rolling waters, a team of divers explores the ocean floor. Anchored in the swell, the ship awaits